Well, good evening, kia ora koutou. Welcome, whānau, to another edition of Big Hairy News. Anna Brooks joins us tonight. Hello, Anna.
Hi.
Doing well? Haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah. Same. Keeping up the fight against COVID.
Yeah, well, obviously we want to touch base on that tonight. It's one of the topics of conversation. Really, what I've thought is out here in the public, not at the coalface like you are, in your lab and working away, looking at things like long COVID, it feels like it's getting better and better and better. I went and had a haircut this week, first time since January, because when you go and get a haircut and you've got a beard, you kind of have to go without a mask on at some stage. And so I took, where incremental risks getting increased, and I thought I felt I was comfortable to go and find. Obviously, all the barbers are wearing masks and stuff, but I was comfortable to go and do that. I hadn't done it since February, I think, and because it's starting to feel better and feel safer. And I just wanted to go, for a while during the second little wave of Omicron, it seems that the wastewater testing was very different from what perhaps the numbers that were being reported were. And so I thought, well, now that the numbers are looking and feeling so good, let's just check in just to see what's going on and have a bit of a chat about it and see what the experts, the people at the coalface, are saying. Because like I've been saying here in Big Hairy News the whole time, I would rather get my advice and my information from those in the labs than those on the 9th floor of the beehive. And that's why we love talking to people like you. Cool? Mm-hmm. Also tonight, when we get on to things, just me tonight hosting. Anna's going to join us for the first part of this, and then just me for all you lovely people joining us at the moment. We are going to have a look at some of the stuff we were going to look at last night, but there was a little breaking news story last night, Anna, with some of the guys from Counterspin getting arrested. Kelvin Alps and his partner, and that kind of took over the whole show, and we didn't really do much else. One of the things we were going to talk about last night, which we will talk about again tonight, is the idea of conspiracy theories in general and how easy they are to debunk and how those people are basically always wrong. And I've got some examples to show you, and not to kind of say exactly what we're going to talk about, what I'm going to talk about, but basically a Google search most times will prove people wrong, and we'll show you how that works with a couple of examples that people have thrown at us. This time last week, Anna, we were talking to Paula Penfold, did our hour special with Paula Penfold from the documentary Fire and Fury. And so since then, we've been pretty much I wouldn't say heavily inundated, but we had a lot of people sending us information that they say is the truth. And I'm going to pull a couple of those out and just go, look, Google search, and there's some information for you. So we're going to have a look at that through tonight as well. Maybe also have a look at today, and there seems to be a little bit of conjecture at the moment, people saying that we shouldn't be normalising it. We might get a look at that. We might have a look at Dr. Sharma and his sort of last stand, as was talked about yesterday morning on the breakfast show with their panel. And the other thing I was thinking tonight, team, who are watching, is if you want to join in, you can do what you always do, of course, which is to put your comments in the chat, like David's done, saying hello, like Simon's done, like Ludwig's done. Or tonight, it's almost like maybe it's a Friday night thing. Maybe it's something we'll do with Friday night. If you want to head to the Discord tonight, maybe, and I've just put the link to the Discord in the didn't change my name, in the chat. Then maybe later on tonight, what we can do, if some people want to, is actually it's telling me I don't have permission to speak in my own channel. What's going on? Oh, there. Okay, I'll fix it. If people want to talk, this week's been a pretty big week with lots of pretty interesting conversations. So if there's anyone watching or involved right now and you want to actually have a conversation about it, like a telephone call and conversation, you can use Discord to do that. Then head to our Discord. Link is now in the chat, and go into the waiting room when you're in there. Make sure your microphone is enabled, and maybe we'll have a chat towards the end of the hour. I was thinking it could be something we could do, that maybe every Friday night we could do like a call-in segment, run our own little talkback show or something, only if people are interested in doing it. Anywho, Anna, hi, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks.
I'm surprised that we're still talking and haven't seen your cat yet, because normally your cat would be in the shop by now.
Yeah, he's probably, his ears are pricking. He'll be like, oh, any moment now. It's usually, to catch you off guard. He won't do it, on cue or anything.
He doesn't do command performances.
No, he'll just appear,
I get that. I get that. Maybe it's that whole thing about doesn't want to be predictable. I've done it the last 2 times. I'm not going to do it tonight.
Yeah, tonight I'm just going to sit here and with his back to me, just over there, not even looking. That's how they work.
I want to ask you a few things around the current situation with COVID. As we know, the COVID numbers are trending down. Well, I guess I'm going to say the reported COVID numbers are trending down. And I think really looking at now, that's 2,400 cases. I think that's the lowest it's been. Really, I think I went back 6 months for this. So in 6 months, it's the lowest number it's been of daily reported cases. So that seems really exciting. I am also interested, and I've done this once before, I'm not sure if I've done it with you, but comparing where hospitalizations are at compared to when the same number of hospitalizations were at last time. Because when we talked about this a few weeks ago, I sort of was of the opinion that maybe you can kind of not report COVID if you're staying at home and getting well, but you can't not go to hospital. So maybe hospitalizations are a better metric for where we're at than the reported numbers. And we did this a few weeks ago when this report came out on The Conversation. We tracked where the numbers were. And if you have a look at where the numbers were around that 338 mark, which on the last time we saw that was about June 26th, if you go to reported cases on June 26th, it's 6,000. It's 6,000 cases a day. Now, I know that hospitalizations might be 2 weeks after, so that might be more like June 10th, which is 6,000. So it's about 6,000 cases a day. So none of that is obviously scientific or anything like that. But I was wondering really the question overall is the numbers we're seeing at the moment, trending down, great. What you're seeing in the lab and stuff, are we at these nice low numbers, or is it that we are about half, which is what that comparison would say, what they should be? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, yeah, the numbers are obviously indicative, especially hospitalizations, but it's always indicative of the severity scale, right? So we still know that COVID is out there, and a large proportion of people are not in the severe category.
Yep.
And really, where we're still being extremely mindful, and the cases are not going away, is long COVID. So, all of these things are, we can't take away from the good news of cases tracking down and things like that, and less severity, because of course that's good news. But we can't ignore the fact that we're still seeing and hearing constantly of cases of long COVID going up, because obviously there's a lag period with long COVID, right?
Yeah.
You don't catch COVID and then automatically have long COVID. Many people come forward after, the classification of long COVID is sort of 3 months of not getting better. So we're still seeing that. And remembering also, you could get your first case of COVID, woohoo, dodged that. That was fine. Your second case might give you long COVID, or your third case. So yes, of course, it is always good news when case numbers are coming down and absolutely lowering the hospitalizations, but we can't lose sight of the fact that repeated infections are not good for us either. So, yep, we're seeing a bit of normalisation out there in society, but a lot of that you sort of put down to human behaviours, right? Like people who have always wanted to move on, or think this is done and dusted, they're out there doing their thing. So you're going to get saturation of who's possibly going to get infected. And those of us that still don't want to get this, we're still masking. And you see, it depends where you're at and where you're immersed, if you like, as to what the level of masking is. In my workplace, it's high level masking. I had 2 COVID cases in my class this week. And
Wow.
You think, phew, lucky we're all masking. But it's still happening. You know what I mean? Like, so, and I think from my perspective, people who are catching COVID, it's many people, it is their first time, but also second infections are absolutely happening too. So there's so many human behaviors at play here. So it's out there. And I think that we're still going to see those that are vulnerable, not ready. You're not going to rush out there and go, oh, well, I might as well get on with it. We're still going to shield. So it's kind of like the level of society who are okay with it spreading are out there being okay with it spreading. And so when everyone's out there catching it and it's spreading, you're going to get it, or you're going to be slightly immune for a while. So, that's what's going to dictate our waves of, coming and going. Yeah.
The research I was looking at, the piece I was looking at in the conversation, sorry, the name was just jumping out of my head, talks a little bit about some research out of Qatar and Denmark, both yet to be peer reviewed, suggests that those who have had previous Omicron infection have a relatively strong immunity against BA5. When you're talking about reinfection, the numbers that were out in the last couple of days, I'm looking at the new cases reported today. Well, might be today or yesterday, last 24 hours, 2,500, of which reinfections were about 10%, of which reinfections within 90 days of their first case was about a quarter of that.
Yeah.
So that means really 2,000, so 90% of the people who reported it. Remember, there could be a bunch of reinfections that aren't being reported and a bunch of cases that aren't being reported, but the ones that we're seeing, about 90% are new cases. Is that what you're understanding and seeing going around at the moment?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm sort of inferring here. Yeah, where because as society relaxes, some people who are vulnerable don't have the ability to be completely protected. So yeah, I mean, it's just anecdotal who sort of says, hey, I just caught COVID, but that's kind of what I'm hearing. But at the same time, I'm hearing reinfections as well. So a lot of, as we hear sort of internationally as well, you know, as these variants evolve, it becomes real world, doesn't it? So the real world scenario here is, you know, we got BA1 and then mostly BA.2. So therefore, how good is our immunity against the next variant, and so on and so forth. And that's what we're sort of seeing. And obviously, you know, it is the good news part of our cases tracking down and us coming out of winter. We're heading into the warmer months where transmission is just less likely because of being outside more and everything like that. So we are heading out, you know, into the good news arena, or the better news, or the lower risk part of the, you know, the cycles, if you like. It doesn't make it go away, as we see in all the other countries. You still get waves in summers as well, but it's just, you know, the human nature of everything sort of playing out, you know. And we always knew that winter was going to be rough.
It is fascinating to watch that human nature thing. I was in a meeting 2 Tuesdays ago. I think about 16 people in the room, everyone shoulder to shoulder at their chairs, no masks. Like it is, there are people who are just treating it as it's now behind. And on some level, my boggle over that is, if everyone was being fucking honest and like, I've got a bit of a scratchy throat, I won't come, I'd feel more comfortable about it. But 2 people in that meeting were coughing. Now, I'm assuming they probably had a cold. You know, that's actually what my 16-year-old was exposed to a group of people last week on a ski trip, where 2 of them came down with COVID. One of them had symptoms, tested negative all the way through, so she probably had a cold. You know, but even still, if people were just honest about it and were fair to the rest of us, that if they've got a bit of a cough, even if it's a cold, stay away, I'd be less concerned. But as you're saying, it's those people who really don't care, or just want to get on with it and kind of accept that they're going to get it, then kind of, I don't know, how do you say it scientifically, fuck it up for the rest of us? I don't know if that's the correct term or not. But I was also, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, because the other sort of phase we're heading into is just being a bit more scientific about who needs to isolate. And I think that will help us all move forward, right? We still need to be responsible if we are sick, whether it's, you know, not COVID or the COVID. If you do have COVID, we should be testing to exit. And in the same vein, if you shouldn't need to isolate if you're not infectious. I think that is a sensible way forward, because then it'll stop people not reporting or whatever. But we still need to be responsible. And I hear you. There's so many places you are, right, where you're hearing, it's usually the unmasked person coughing, right? It just generally is.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what? Come on, mask. So yeah. And or you've had COVID and it's your post-COVID cough, right? And so everyone bleary eyes at you because you're coughing.
You almost need to say that. Like I've got I think it's called cough variant asthma. So if I get like a normal cold, then I can get like 100-day cough afterwards.
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened to me during COVID, ironically. I haven't got a cold because I've been wearing masks when I'm out in public. So I haven't really been sick for 2.5 years now. But when I do have that cold and I get over it and I'm still coughing, I do say to people, oh, it's asthma. it's asthma. I've got asthma, and I'm taking a puffer, and so it's like it's the same. I couldn't imagine having that now. That'd be 1,000 times worse. Walking into a store and going, and me knowing it's just asthma, and everyone else be like, oh. Well, actually, maybe from what you're saying about people just getting older, maybe they wouldn't be. That'd be even scarier if they weren't.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I have a bit of a, there's that kind of adage that you don't want to speak things out because you think you have an influence over the universe, and you might make it make things happen.
Yeah.
Like how you got to wear the right socks when you go and watch the All Blacks rest, they're not going to win, that sort of thing. I'm going to ask a question now, and in the back of my head, I'm kind of going, oh, am I going to be responsible for this by asking this question? I feel like it's been a long time since we've had another variant, and on some level, I kind of go, if those who have had COVID seem, and I'm going to say seem to be, because that research wasn't peer reviewed, but seem to have a stronger protection against BA5. And if we don't get another variant, I assume, like what happened with bird flu, this could be a tailing off of what we're seeing. Either everyone will get it, or those that aren't going to get it won't. Those that will going to get it will, and then they'll be stronger against BA5 until it peters out a little bit. Is that even though I'm not suggesting that will happen, is that a possibility? Is that what viruses can and would do?
Well, we're not. I don't think it's really predicted that this is the end yet, is it? I mean, what are the graphs all around the world showing us at the moment? Do we see many graphs? I mean, that's the thing. You've got to go look for them, right? Because everyone's over it everywhere else.
Yeah.
But it's still out there, and I think that's it's the danger zone we're in with respect to information coming through. Is that sure, we're going to hear less and less about infections and less about mortality, and all of those things coming down are always going to be great. But we're going to hear more and more about the impacts on our workforce. We're going to hear more and more about long COVID and disability and all of that. And, when are we going to wake up to this? When are we going to wake up to the fact that this is the reality? And we're not doing much about it or anything about it.
Yeah, well, let's look at that, because I haven't introduced you very well. I feel like you're part of the show now, Anna. I'm just like, everyone knows Anna. Everyone knows that she's into long COVID. That's what her thing is. But for people who are joining us, because we've had a bit of bump in numbers since this week has gone on. So there'll be people who may have not seen us talking to you before. One of your areas of research expertise is long COVID. You'd be one of the foremost experts in the country at the pointiest end of the needle when it comes to information around long COVID. And you brought to my attention the story that came out this week about the 14-year-old. I think you said 14, is that right? 14-year-old who was a sporty as netball player, was going around a whole bunch of doctors, and they were kind of telling her to get back to exercise. She says this in the story: I was just getting tired from doing everyday things. On Saturdays, we play netball, and after every game, I came home, and then I'd just be in bed. And after every day of school, I just came home and I went straight to bed. Then things deteriorated even further. It would be really interesting to get your perspective on long COVID. Perhaps if there's people watching who haven't really heard your perspective before through what we do, and maybe you could speak to this. I know of no one I know personally, but I know of someone who has a family member of a 14-year-old in the UK, and their long COVID turned into the ability not to walk for a while.
Yeah.
So these things that were happening to these, not just the 80-year-olds, but in this case, the 14-year-olds, to do with long COVID, I guess, can I just open the floor and let you speak to that?
Yeah, because I did another interview this week where it was sort of inferred.
What?
It's not just,
hang on. What?
I mean,
another interview?
No,
my God.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was inferred that long COVID's not just in older people, and I was like, what? Long COVID's never been just about it's never been about people with underlying conditions, the elderly, or anything like any age group. Of course, it can impact all age groups, and maybe where some of the information from the older age groups can come in is where there is a tendency, if you are severe, you've got a higher chance of having longer term symptoms. But essentially, they almost call that a different illness. What we're talking about here is everyone who never needs to be hospitalized. And we don't even call that mild, because some people have a hellish time with their COVID. And so anyone who is not hospitalized, never goes near the hospital, you have a chance of getting long COVID. And that means your symptoms linger, or then it's not just lingering. Lingering can be common. you can linger for a few weeks and feel rubbish for ages. But it's the real situation where those symptoms don't just linger; they can actually get worse. And as that sort of story was unfolding there with the 14-year-old, she was obviously not too bad to be able to go back to school, her sports, and then she wasn't ignoring the symptoms. She was getting advice that she just needed to gently go back, keep carrying on and doing her exercise, and boom, now she's in a worse state. She's now managing only a few hours of school a day, and her fatigue is deep-seated. And
Wow.
so what we know is that, there's a lot we don't know about the causes and all the rest of it, but we know that the virus is causing widespread inflammation, potential damage, even silent damage. Like, you don't have to have a severe illness, you can have it quite mildly. And we know that if you have any of those signs of long COVID, or signs that you haven't recovered, so shortness of breath, fatigue, those things, just to rest through them. And especially if you're super sporty, there's no point rushing back and then falling off that cliff and having to rest for months. And we don't know what the recovery trajectory is. And the key thing here is I guess, especially the sporty kids, it's where it's extremely obvious, because you're trying to go back to that massive regime of exercise. Gotcha. And you just can't. It's not to say that it doesn't happen to others either, but we're sort of raising that awareness for teachers to look out for it, for parents to look out for it. That kid that comes home from school and, as described there, has to go to bed when they get home. They're just really sleepy. They might have random rashes break out, or they might have stomach issues. We're sort of making sure that people are aware of this, that we don't expect it to be as common in children as it might be in adults. We don't really know the prevalence yet. But we are absolutely seeing it, and it's just not helpful when we keep hearing that kids are resilient and they bounce back. Just, let's not minimize this. It will and can happen in kids, and just to keep your eye out for it so that they can get help.
You say we don't know the numbers yet. I remember an article, like in the last 6 months, talking about potentially up to 10% of COVID people.
Yep.
Is that still, even though you don't know the numbers, is that still a number that is being talked about, that it could be upwards of 10%? So like, I was just looking at this figure here, right, which is the total number of cases reported at the moment at 1.73 million. If that is under, you could be talking about, let's say 2.5 to 3 million people in New Zealand have had COVID so far. Let's say half the population. That would be 10% of that would be 250,000 people with ongoing problems. Is that a realistic but yet terrifying number?
It is realistic. And I mean, and how that might break down is we might have 250,000 New Zealanders impacted in enough of a way that's going to impact their life. And, like, as in, it might be that they're off work, they're part-time, all of those things that they might have to peel back life because they can't just get back to how they were. And for some people, that might be a short period, and some people that might be long-term. And we don't know. And I think, so that 10% number could be that 10% of people are going to be impacted, and it's just how long they're impacted for, or what the scale of their debilitation is going to be. So, and we expect that number to be much lower in children. We do expect that, but we don't know that number even more so or less so. We don't have those numbers. I saw it sneak through the news, I think maybe yesterday, that there's going to be more widespread information or rollout to GPs of coding, so that you can code whether someone has what they're calling post-COVID syndrome, so they can start tracking it in the system. But I think even that's going to be difficult if you're going to have to get to your doctor to get coded and all the rest of it. It should have just been integrated into our COVID app, so you can say, hey, I'm not recovered. You're not going to just make it up, are you? You're not going to say, hey, let's mess with the system. I'm not recovered. It's just a simple way of saying, flagging, I'm not feeling good at 3 months. Maybe you should give me a call or something like that. And the thing is, and because I've done a bit of, I've been to a couple of conferences, interacted with GPs, primary healthcare, and some clinics are doing an amazing job where they are tracking every patient that comes through their door, like every single person on their books who gets COVID. They give them a call at 6 weeks. How are you doing? And so they have like a community of actual information. And that's incredible. And we just sort of were like, wow, why don't we have this kind of system nationwide? Then we can start to get a handle on it. Because we want to know how many people feel rubbish for 6 weeks and then come right. because that's helpful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, that's not saying everyone 10%, you're going to have this for ages. We need to understand how many people are just going to delay that. And also on top of that, if you do rest through all those horrible symptoms and don't try and push through your, what you're capable of, then, that might prevent those long-term impacts. But they certainly are happening. And every time, as I say, like when that story broke, it brings forward a whole bunch of people again saying, hey, that's me. Is there anything I can do about this and all the rest of it? So it's happening. It's just going to keep continuing. So,
And did you mention it or did I miss it? I get confused with what we talked about before we started and what we have talked about here. And I haven't had COVID. Imagine how crap I'd be if I got COVID. My brain's already so foggy.
You can't say you've got COVID brain, can you?
No, I'm just dumb. About the going to the doctor, this 14-year-old, and being told to get back to exercise.
Yeah.
Have we talked about that now? Did I miss you talking about that now? And if we haven't, do we want to just reiterate that, you being the expert, if people are listening now, that's maybe not the best plan to recover from COVID, to get back to exercise too soon?
Yeah, it's this sort of historical misconception that when you're fatiguey, post illness, that sort of, they call it a gradual return to exercise, but they're not really paying attention to the fact that that's a bad thing to do after this particular virus. At the very least, we know that that's not working, and you could tell from her story that's exactly what happened. She, right. She tried to go back playing sport. And when the doctors were saying it's fine, you should just do that gradually, boom, she tanked and is now can't do that at all. So absolutely, if you are feeling any sign of fatigue from exertion, then lay off, stay and just, you have to recuperate and relax. And that is, we know that seems to be working as well. We heard some of the high profile sports teams having players impacted by COVID, and you could see that they were taking note.
Yeah.
Because we're not hearing, well, I mean, who knows if anyone has been long-term impacted, because, we're not hearing any of those stories coming through, but, they did know that you had to rest through that, because we just know that pumping blood around the body that's inflamed and not recovered yet is not a good idea.
Hey, thanks, Kooky and Nick, for the super chat, but he's got a question as well. Nick says, hi, Pat. Question for Anna. Are we, New Zealand, collecting intensified data of people with long COVID, regular MRIs or CT scans? And then he's got an addendum that says, mainly interested in the front lobe damage seen similar to dementia patients. Frontal
lobe. Yeah. So it's a great question. And the problem is, until we have sort of resourcing where everyone who's been impacted could be screened or, medically imaged, it's not going to happen, essentially, unless it's sort of study orientated. But at the same time, we absolutely know that in the vast majority of people with this condition, medical imaging comes back clear. So that is the problem. So it's still important for anyone who is on a severe end of the scale and their symptoms are quite, are very debilitating, to get any of those more obvious medical conditions ruled out. Like, as in, people can have serious blood clots, they can have, impacts, they can have strokes, they can have heart attacks, all of those things, because this virus is gnarly, right? We know it can cause mayhem, and that's almost not long COVID, that the severe, those types of impacts from the virus. But essentially, the key thing here is you can go to your doctor, you can be severely ill, every single test is run, and they all come back normal. And so that's what the problem is, because, and that's where the whole dismissal came from, that, well, there's nothing wrong. And it's like, no, there's something definitely wrong. We don't have the right tests. So it's a really challenging thing to also communicate, right? That, you're feeling rubbish, and do you push yourself to get to the doctor and then go through that rigmarole of being told there's nothing wrong? It is getting through that. Doctors are saying, look, there's nothing, we've done the tests and there's nothing we can find. But essentially that's the sort of the decision that people make. But it's still very critical that any of the sort of signs and symptoms that you should get checked out, you do. Like, people get stabbing chest pains, all of those sorts of things that you should get checked out, absolutely. Because, as I say, this virus can cause serious impacts. Yeah. So we just don't have any system yet.
I'm more interested, this is not really a question about COVID per se, I'm more interested in your experiences of the last 3 weeks or 2-3 weeks, or 2 weeks perhaps. 2 weeks ago, that Fire and Fury documentary was released on Stuff. It was primarily about the Wellington protests, which were primarily about vaccines and COVID restrictions. Would you guys in the labs and at the coalface, have you guys been talking about that? Have you seen any, I don't know whether it's repercussions, but has anything changed for you guys since the media has picked up so highly in the last couple of weeks on an aspect or an element of the societal response to COVID vaccines and the mandates and stuff?
Well, it's always been there. Like, I don't necessarily think I've sensed any change. It's always been there. Like, my inbox is full of reckons, you know.
But I reckon.
Yeah.
I reckon.
Yeah. And, you know, have you seen this, and this, and this? And you're kind of like, oh, no, gosh, I didn't know that one. So, I mean, like, so for me personally, I haven't seen an escalation of, in any way, in the sense that it's always been there.
Yep.
It's the conspiracies have always been floating around. And I mean, you know, and for some, you know, whether it's to do with vaccination or even long COVID and things like that, you know, I will often engage with someone who's legitimately asking questions because they've been drawn into it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then your tolerance can sort of disappear when it just becomes left field, right? But you know, so to some people, they're complete victims, right? They're complete victims of being sucked into it, rather than, I mean, it's a minefield. It is, but I haven't personally noticed any difference along the trajectory.
So nothing for you personally. What about around the water cooler? Has there been a topic of conversation in the last couple of weeks? Any more interest in it from you guys?
Maybe I'm too masked away from the, you know, water cooler.
Yeah, how do you stand around the water cooler and talk about friends? Hang on, that was the 90s, wasn't it? That's not now.
It's really funny when you really notice this human nature thing when you're in your mask and you're trying to whisper to your colleague and you're like, that doesn't work anymore. Because you're like, you can't.
You might as well just text them. Even you're standing beside them, just text them.
It's really funny. You sort of do a whisper thing and you're like, no, I can't hear you because you're in a mask and you're whispering and I can't see your mouth.
If people want to find out more, and I guess what you keep saying into your inbox, you've got a public profile on the Auckland University page if people want to connect with you. Like if there's people, especially because your area of research at the moment is heavily involved with long COVID, if they want to contact you, they can just find you on the Auckland University. If I was a professional broadcaster, I'd have your page here to show people in it, but they can just Google your name and are you shaking here going, because you're just shaking here going, nah, because you're not a professional broadcaster. I get it. That's okay. I don't think so either.
I said I don't have a page of any worth to point to.
But thanks for coming on. I think it was a really important update because what I hear, it's funny if I repeat back to you exactly what hasn't been said, that'll show how pointless this has been. But no, what I'm hearing is it's great that we're trending down. Yeah. Long COVID is a very serious problem for some people. And we should still be taking precautions, A, because it's still out there, even though the numbers are going down, but B, because there is a group of people who are like, fuck it, let's just get on with life. And they're probably the ones that are putting us most at risk. Is that a fair synopsis?
And as in, you know, people who have moved on and are over it and out there and the virus is out there, you know, they're in a what everyone seems to call this wall of immunity or whatever you want to call it, where, you know, like as in it's spreading around people who can catch it. And as people who haven't had it, or as people are starting to emerge, you need a vessel to get infected, don't you? So I think that sort of slows down the spread of the people that are out there throwing caution to the wind and have had it and all the rest of it. So, well, of course, we're going to keep seeing cases. And it just depends how long that lasts as to whether, as you say, you know, is another variant going to come through and catch us off guard, or are we, you know, going to cross our fingers and keep tracking down and get through to our summer months and have less of an impact. We can only hope, right? But it's still, you know, let's keep mindful that, you know, long COVID is absolutely real, and just because you've had it once, you know, keep an eye out for any of those symptoms. If you are unlucky to get it multiple times, just you know, look after the vessel.
And people are still getting it within that 3-month period. I mean, it's a very small percentage. It's still like 2 or 3%, but people are still getting it. So whilst that's a very small number to think about out of 5 million people, It's not like people can say, like, I was of the opinion that, like, people who haven't had it, what we should be doing is, because 90% of people getting it at the moment are people who haven't had it. So what we should be doing is trying to help protect those people almost more than anybody else at the moment, because that's the vessel you're talking about that it's most likely to jump into according to the numbers.
Exactly.
So example is my 16-year-old who was on that ski trip I talked about. They said, if you have not had COVID, you're a household contact and there's a 7-day stand down. If you had COVID in the last 3 weeks and you obviously were testing, you could come back to school. So that was her school actually going, and I've criticized some schools and some principals, but that was quite a good example of her school going, let's protect the ones who haven't had it, because they're the ones at the moment who are more likely to get it. And I think if we could get that in society, that also might help those numbers trend down even further.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you need a vector to carry it, and it'll be those who are susceptible. And we just don't know enough about, those people that keep, are able to keep getting infected, and those ones that aren't. We just don't know. Yeah.
Cool bananas. Hey, thanks, Anna. Always appreciate you being on. Appreciate you giving us a touch base tonight. And disappointed we didn't see Theo, but maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe
stuck up cat.
That's right. He wasn't interested. No.
Hey, thanks for your time. All the best.
See ya.
Cheers, Anna. Anna Brooks from the University of Auckland. Right. So let me say this again. It's just me on tonight, so I'm solo hosting. So if you want to, I guess, do a little bit of co-hosting yourself and connect with us and have a chat, then you can. I've just put the link in the chat, or the YouTube chat again, which is the Discord URL. If you come into the Discord URL and you go into the waiting room, then I can bring you. Can I be honest with you? I can attempt to bring you in. I've had a few things a few weeks ago that went wrong with my system, and the audio kind of messed up a little bit. And I hope it hasn't affected my setup on Discord, like the way my settings on Discord. But I just think it's been such a kind of, I think, big and important week in the show since last Friday, that if you've been with us for most of the night, some of the nights, and you want to have a chat about anything you have heard or seen or been involved with, you're welcome to go to Discord. The link is in the YouTube chat. Log yourself in there, and I can see there's some people in there now. I don't know if they're just snoozing or they're actually in there. And all you need to do is go to the waiting room. And if you go into the waiting room at some stage through these next couple of stories, I'll attempt to drag you over and you and I can have a chat. I do say attempt because, there's probably a 30% chance that I'll cock it up and I'll attempt to bring you over if you want to have a chat, and it won't work. But if you want to, it's there. If you don't, no problems at all. Right, let's talk about conspiracy theories. Now, my tongue is in my cheek just a smidge when I say conspiracy theorists are always wrong, because, like a broken watch can be right twice a day. And funny how that's only if it's analog. You say that to a kid today, they're like, well, hang on, if it's flashing or it's dead, no battery. But, an analog broken watch is right twice a day. Every dog has its day, that kind of stuff. And you look at people like Alex Jones, and they do credit Alex Jones with being right on a couple of things. Now, the thing that they don't say is the other 300 conspiracy theories he's thrown out there have been wrong. So I acknowledge before I start this piece, when I say conspiracy theories or conspiracy theorists are always wrong, I guess I should probably say almost always wrong, if I was being fair. And the other thing is, what happens with conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists is sometimes they have 5% of the truth and they're 95% wrong, or maybe even more. Maybe they have 20% of the truth and they're 80% wrong. But I always think about the flat earthers. I love flat earthers, and I've spent a good amount of time speaking to and being with flat earthers. But the thing with flat earthers is their maths is always wrong. Right? No matter what they say, their maths is always wrong. And I've actually had a couple of times where I've spoken to flat earthers in my other podcast. And I just thought I'd give you an example of what I'm talking about very quickly before we go into the conspiracy theorists that I'm going to respond to based on the last couple of weeks of broadcasting here. So this is an example. If you don't know what we're talking about, if you're a normal person and you haven't seen this before, that world map you can see right there is the flat earth world map. Although if you tell them that's the flat earth world map, they'll say, why are you telling me what my map is? And your response to that would be, well, 99% of flat earthers adhere to this map. The problem with their map, and this is the maths always being wrong, is their kilometers. This was actually from a conversation I had with a flat earther, and you can see those two arrows going from Auckland-ish, from Auckland International Airport. The black arrow goes to Los Angeles. The red arrow goes to Santiago in South America. Now, on a globe, Los Angeles is 10,500 kilometers from Auckland, and Santiago is 9,700 kilometers on a globe, because we go around the bottom. On a flat Earth, where they put it down, they put it flat, as you can see just by looking at it, Santiago is twice the distance to reach as is Los Angeles. So their maths, and I'm not wanting to talk about flat Earth, but I'm just showing you about conspiracy theories. Their maths is always wrong. If you spent any time at all talking to or looking at the flat Earth idea, they will say you can't see a certain distance. But what they won't then work out correctly is actually the height that they're at to look that distance gives them an elevation to see that distance. And their maths is always, always wrong. So I wanted to tell you about some interactions I've had this week, and I wanted to show you how easy it is to dismiss conversations. I've got a comment from our YouTube channel this week, and I've got someone sent me a screenshot from a one of the anti-vaxxers has made a documentary, and I got sent a screenshot of it, and I thought that was an interesting screenshot. So I researched the information on the screenshot, and they're always wrong. And the thing that I'm fascinated about, and I actually contacted a psychologist today who works in the psychology department. I wanted to say, can you explain why? And I've shown you guys before the conversation, episode 129 on my other podcast, if you want to go check it out, with Stephen Lewandowski talking about people using motivated cognition. Motivated cognition is simply the idea that they have a predetermined result, right? And they're in a position with a predetermined result. If evidence is placed in front of them to disprove the result, what they do is they find a different path to get to the same result. And that's what happens. And so whilst I understand that, and you probably understand that as well, I still am very interested as to why conspiracy theorists believe things blindly. Or what they'll do is they'll cite a source that is self-referential, that cites itself, or they'll all cite the same source. That's always a point of contention when everyone cites a singular source rather than having multiple. And we just had Anna Brooks on, there's a dozen people in New Zealand that we've talked to, all doing different work, all looking at COVID from different areas. They all say the same thing from their own individual different points of research and academia. It's not one person going, well, here's the person that speaks the truth, and then you have 12 people coming from them. It's always from the same source. It's self-referential, or it's just basically, oh, someone said this, I heard this. So I'll give you an example. Yeah. I'm going to put it on this one where I'm down in the corner. This is a comment on one of the, what was this one about? Oh, this was me and George. Oh, this was about the prequel to the march on Tuesday. This comment was made by Sandra. I can say Sandra's name because Sandra has made a public statement. Somewhere within that conversation, we were talking about how this whole vaccine mandate is not necessarily a new thing. Yeah. Well, even though the mandate's gone for teachers and that kind of thing. But for nurses, for example, nurses have always been pretty much required to get vaccines. So it's not new. One of the comments was this: nurses didn't always have to get vaccines before COVID unless going overseas. Now, that's a testable statement, right? Not a detestable statement, just a testable statement. And look, to be honest, I went, because I hear a fact and or a thought and I go, now we should probably double check this. So of course I went and I Googled it. And what did I Google? I Googled required vaccines for nurses, New Zealand. And this is one of the first results from the BPAC. All staff should have received a primary course of vaccines against tetanus, diphtheria, polio, measles, mumps, and rubella, funded adult catch-up vaccines, and hepatitis B, non-funded adult catch-up vaccines. Now, one could argue that in some of those writings it does say recommended, but in other places it does say required. So, for example, this was in 2015. And what I did actually, so you know, is it was very difficult to look up nurses, vaccines, yada, yada, yada. Because if you Google that now, what you just basically get is all COVID stuff, all mandate stuff. So what I did is I set my Google search to the 1st of January 2010 to the end of 2018. So it wasn't going to find any results from the COVID stuff, because that obviously would then be harder to find, because what I wanted to know is before COVID, what was the situation? So in 2015, I think this is in Waikato, Waikato DHB suspend 3 nurses for refusing to have flu vaccinations or wear masks. So they brought in a new rule that said you either and I thought that was quite generous. They didn't even say you have to be vaccinated, but they said you either need to be vaccinated or wear a mask, and it was mandated. So it was something that existed. Here's some information from Otago University from one of the, I think it might be from the nursing course. So you could argue, you get that 5% correct. You could argue that this is not necessarily for working, but it is for studying to become a nurse, to have to go into the workforce. You are required to have immunity to Hep B, measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, and to be tested for Hep C, HIV, and tuberculosis. If you lack sufficient immunity, you will require vaccinations. Now, again, could someone argue, well, that's not for the workforce? Possibly, but it is for the course to become a nurse to go into the workforce. So I just wanted to show how easy it is to sort of disprove when these people say these things. So going back to the original comment, nurses don't have to get vaccines before COVID unless going overseas, is debunked. 5 minutes, Google, debunked it. And if you want to challenge the article, fair enough. Maybe there's a journalist that wants to put a spin on it, but you can't really challenge the course that the nurses have to do before they go into the workforce requiring vaccinations. It's there. So I'll give you another one. Where is it? This is it. So this is the screenshot that someone sent me. It's a documentary, apparently. Well, I'll put parentheses around it. Coming out, and it makes a claim. So we can test that claim. In January 2021, this is a screen grab. You can see it's not actually. I can't play it. It's a screen grab. In January 2021, Austria was the first country in the world to mandate N95 FFP2 masks. The mandate was further expanded in September 2021. Nevertheless, right, this is the claim. Nevertheless, by November 2021, Austria reported the highest number of cases in the world. That's the claim. That's in this documentary. By November 2021, Austria reported the highest number of cases in the world. Cool. Let's go have a look, shall we? This is Austria's COVID cases. And I searched Austria COVID cases, November 2021. And I'm actually just going to go to the highest peak in November. So that's on the 23rd of November. Yeah. The highest peak in 2021, new cases, 11,635. There's the information. Cool. Let's pick another country. Let's pick COVID cases, Germany, November 2021. Let's go to the same sort of date, around that 21st of November, 1920. There's 22nd, there's 21st. That's 23rd. 23rd will do. 45,000 new cases. If you can't see that, that's what it says. 45,000 new cases. Let's pick another country. Let's pick USA. US, COVID cases, USA, November 2021. So let's find November. There you go. There's the 20th of November 2021. New cases, 41,064 new daily cases. Now, remember what the claim was? The claim was, by November 2021, Austria reported the highest number of cases in the world. 3 Google searches. In fact, it really was only 1 Google search and then 2 copy print and then change the word Austria to Germany and Germany to USA. Disprove that. And I'm kind of the opinion, and maybe I'm a bit of a hard ass when it comes to this, is if one of your serious facts within your evidence is that easy to debunk and that simple, then I'm not going to take anything within that document seriously. Sorry, there may be some serious points in there, there may be some fair points in there, but I'm not going to take any of it seriously. If you make a claim that the highest number of cases in the world were in Austria in November 2021, and with literally 2 other searches, I find 2 other countries. I could go through and do 160 searches and do every country, but I'm like, well, if it says the highest, no one should be higher. 2 searches, 2 of them higher, debunked. Conspiracy theorists, conspiracy theories are always wrong most of the time. Always wrong most of the time. And they're very easy to disprove. This is what I'm going to ask you to do. Now, look, people watching right now, you're all sensible people. You're all, onto it people. You know what you're doing. I'm a little bit preaching to the choir here, so this may fall on deaf ears. But when you get a fact or figure given to you by Uncle Bob on Facebook, or given to you by someone even you trust, research it. Don't forward it. Don't pass it on. Train your bullshit nerve to go off. I remember I received a decade ago a message from someone on Facebook, and it was talking about Hamas, and it talked about how Hamas was marrying children, accused them of being pedophiles, marrying children. And I was like, you know, Hamas is a particular group. Some people say it's a terrorist group. Other people say they're freedom fighters. They've got, they're controversial, and many people think they're not the best. But that didn't sound right to me. My bullshit nerve went off. Yeah. Because apart from anything else, Hamas is clever organization. And I suspect if they were doing that, they wouldn't make it so easy to get that information out there. One Google search, you know, that one Google search showed me? It showed me that in the culture, what the flower girls do is they dress identical to the brides. So what they do as part of their ceremonies is the flower girls wear the same dresses as the brides, only miniature versions of them. And in one Google search, I found that story. And then the next story down was from a BBC reporter who was there debunking the story as well. Now, this person that I know, this friend that I know, they had an agenda, which was a pro-Israel, anti-Palestine agenda or anti-Hamas agenda. Didn't research it, didn't do it, just forward it on. And it just makes me it frustrates the crap out of me when people just get something in their inbox and they go, whoosh, and they forward it on. Train your bullshit nerve to go off. And when it goes off, trust it and research it. And I would almost go so far to say, maybe this is a little bit too far, I would almost go so far as to say, if you can't absolutely be assured and prove that this thing that you want to pass on is 100% accurate, I would challenge you or question you to maybe pass it on or not. You know, just because if nothing else over the last 2 years, if we've learned nothing else, one of the things we should have learned is that disinformation to me is purposefully passing on wrong information, and misinformation, which is basically believing what it is but passing on wrong information, is incredibly damaging to our society, and it leads to some very, very, very serious outcomes. So there's my encouragement. Do your research, pass it on. I've just shown you a way that makes it really, really easy most of the time to find the correct answer. Is honestly most of the time a Google search. And when you do your Google search, go to reputable sources, right? Reputable sources to find your research. You know, look at the URLs. Go to .govs or .edus. You know, look for good articles citing good sources, find multiple sources, and then smash that bullshit. Pass it on. We've got someone in the chat. I think Emperor might be in the chat. Let's see if I can do this. Hey, Emperor, and pull you across. If this doesn't work, it's going to go real bad real quick, and I'll just turn it off. But let's give it a go. Emperor, you there? You need to turn your mic on, Emperor. I think I can see that it's not on. I'm just going to give you 10 seconds, Emperor Vale. And if you want to turn your mic on, you can. And if you don't, we'll put you back out just in case. I told you, I said it might not work. I did say that pretty clearly, that it might not work. All right, I'll put you back in the waiting room. There we go. All right, team, what else did we say we're going to talk about tonight? There's a couple of other things. I was going to talk about the Sharma drama being over, but I'll tell you something just around the subject matter of what there is still to talk about. Now, look, I apologize if you've been chatting away there, guys. I've been obviously operating a different computer. I haven't really seen what's been going off, but I'm going to. I haven't seen the chat to be able to maybe share a lot of it with you, with what other people have been talking about. So I'm actually flicking through right now to see what's going on to see. Yeah. Anyway. I'll keep an eye on it, but yeah, when I'm the only one here, it's harder to keep an eye on the chat. Normally Chewy or George will be watching the chat while I'm doing stuff. Hey, let's have a look at the need for us as a country to welcome on board. And I think, again, probably preaching to the choir here, but welcome on board and normalise today. There's been a couple of instances in the last couple of days, and I got to tell you that I find it even more interesting that often people who seem to be getting attacked publicly for speaking Maori and trying to normalize it are female. I do wonder what the element of offensiveness is there. And this is, I don't know if you guys heard about this. It was on her Instagram feed, but it was in one of those stories that only last 24 hours. So it's gone today. I had it yesterday, but I'm sorry, it's gone today. Orini Kaiparas, I think it is. I'm talking about her moko being offensive. A guy wrote to, I think, TVNZ saying, we continue to object strong. I like it how we comes out like he represents a big group of people. We continue to object strongly to using a Maori news presenter with a moku, which is offensive and aggressive looking. This is what a guy called, I think, David had written in an email addressed to the entire newsroom. A bad look. She also bursts into the Maori language, which we do not understand. Stop it now. And the story was about Orini actually kind of pushing back. She normally leaves it alone. And she put it on Instagram. She wrote, today I'd had enough. There was another story actually from TVNZ, ironically. And one of their news readers or weather readers who's been speaking to Maori a lot this week was asked by Maddie if she was okay because she'd been getting some flack as well.
Oh, kai te whaiau. I always think about my tupuna, my ancestors, my grandfather who's still here, and what he endured. You know, he was physically abused for speaking te reo Māori. So what's a few racist comments, you know? My tupuna were burnt alive in a church. So really, I think it's just continuing their legacy and doing what I can and standing on the shoulders of giants. So that's really how I look at it. And it's triggered heaps of positive conversations. And if anything, I've received more positive feedback than negative. I just think that small minority are very loud. They're very loud. And some media outlets like to take those, I guess, loud comments and amplify them.
Yeah, you're wrong, Maddie. Because you said it's divisive. I don't actually agree that it's nearly as divisive as maybe we think it is.
Right.
And that I think there's a fraction of New Zealand society that gets really upset when they hear real Maori words or they see te reo on TV, and how amazing is te reo doing it, right?
I know.
And yet I actually don't think it's like a 50-50 split. I think there's like this tiny sliver of New Zealand society, and I think they've got really loud voices or maybe just really powerful keyboards because they never ever say anything to your face. They only ever write a few comments on Facebook. And I actually don't think that's representative of New Zealand today. I think it's just this tiny little pocket of people.
Well, let's go back to, because first of all, it's a big deal in this world to get asked to do something like that, to present the weather on the 6 o'clock news. So congratulations, first of all. Was there ever a conversation about whether or not you should or shouldn't?
No, not at all. So when I got asked to jump into that space, I said, you know, I did ask, I'm going to use te reo Māori. People keep encouraging me to be yourself, be your authentic self. And te reo Māori is my first language. And it is the language of this funeral. Where else am I going to use this beautiful language? And so that's me in my truest form, speaking te reo. And it was really interesting because I only used maybe about 12 or 13% of te reo Māori in that whole broadcast. And I always make sure, I think the only rule was making sure that I translate everything that I say. And I do that. And so when people say they don't understand, well, you've got some graphics there to help accommodate what I'm saying. And I also translate it straight away. And so not only is it a beautiful opportunity to learn more te reo Māori, you're learning about the weather in te reo Māori. And even myself, I've learned some cool new place names that I didn't know about in the South Island, and some new words for different weather patterns. So we're all learning at the same time. Yeah.
I wonder what you make of it, Jack.
So there you go. Look, I mean, I know it's a story that most of us are like, well, what's the big deal here? We're on board, and I think we are. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that for people who think that Māori is not a, like commercial language, for example, I have to tell you, working in broadcasting as these people are, it's probably the most commercial language in this country. Working in tourism, working in lots of areas. If you are fluent, if you've got kids who are going to going to school and they're thinking about languages and they're going like, shall we do French? Shall we do German? Shall we do Maori? I would say a couple of things. Maori will help them learn more about the place they're living. And like, if they want to go work in Germany, or they want to go work in France, or they want to do some international, work that's going to take them around the world, possibly a language like Germany or French or Japanese or Germany, I said in German, might be more beneficial to their commercial aspect. But if they're going to be focused on New Zealand and living in New Zealand, I have to say and tell you that if you're fluent in Māori, whatever job you're doing in New Zealand, your CV will go to the top of the list. And I think we have normalized it now. And it's interesting, they talk about some outlets want to amplify it. I don't know what outlets they mean, but I can think about a particular online platform that they may be referencing that likes to amplify these things quite loudly. Ironically, and we wish the editor-in-chief of that platform well, because he's had some heart issues and he's done he's had a very good report back today, which he shared on Twitter, and he thanked the taxpayer for his healthcare. And I just thought, wasn't it interesting of Mr. Plunkett? And we wish him well. We want everyone to be healthy and well, and I say go for it. That's what the taxpayer funded money is for. But isn't it interesting that some people rally against taxpayers' money being used in broadcasting, and they think that that actually works against journalists and journalism and gives them a bias. Yet they're happy to trust the taxpayers' money being used in medicine because that's appropriate and it gives them a brilliant service. I just had that thought this afternoon. I wonder why some people think taxpayer-funded broadcasting is tainted, and they rally against it and they don't want to be involved with it. Yet taxpayer-funded medicine is brilliant and they milk it for all they're worth. Just a thought. All right, guys. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate you being with me tonight. I appreciate you being a bit of a one-on-one. I've done this a few times by myself. I enjoy it, actually, doing it by myself. Well, not really by myself. Anna held my hand for 35 minutes. But let me say this. We've been talking a lot about Fire and Fury and about the arrest of the counterspin people yesterday and about the protests plural, in Wellington this week. And this weekend, it does look like Chantal Baker and I will be having a conversation. Chantal came back to me today. I've told you a few times that I approached her. She came back to me today saying that she couldn't do tonight, but she offered time tomorrow morning for a pre-record. I am at the start of 35 days of straight broadcasting. I'm going to be broadcasting every single day for 35 days. And that's because the next 5 weekends, I'm going to be hosting Dunedin-focused mayoralty conversations. So at 2:00 tomorrow afternoon and at 2:00 on Sunday afternoon, I'm going to be hosting 2 candidates who are vying to be Dunedin's mayor. Now, for most of you, that probably won't interest you because you're not in Dunedin. But for those of you who are in Dunedin, I'm doing it because I'm in Dunedin and I want to provide some content locally as well. Anyone's obviously entitled to come and watch it. It's going to be on the YouTube channel. It's going to be on some Dunedin Facebook pages as well. So I have to work out with Chantal when exactly it is I'm going to have time to talk to her, because I'm at the start of 35 days of broadcasting in a row. And whilst this is quite a long way away, then I will be taking a week off and I will be offering this seat to some other people if they want to run the show for a week, because I will definitely be taking a week off and actually leaving Dunedin and going elsewhere in the country for a while. So anyway, yes, so Chantella said yes. And I've been talking about that this week and talking about inviting her. So might talk to her at some stage this weekend. And if it will, it'll be a pre-record and I'll bring it out next week. Might talk to her next week and use it for one of the evening shows next week. But that is, when I say confirmed, I've offered, she said yes, she's offered a time, I've said that doesn't work, let's make a time. So yeah, we'll hopefully have a chance to catch up with Chantal Baker. And look, as I always say about everyone I talk to, my biggest thoughts in life, my biggest desire in broadcasting is to understand why people believe what they believe. And that goes for someone who I have completely a contrary opinion to, or for someone I completely am in the same camp as. So, look, we've got people offering to fill in now. Great. It's yours. Take it. First week of October, it can be yours. Go for it. And I will, and I'll keep you up to date with that interview as well. So anyway, that's me. I'm done. I'm out of here, actually almost on time for once, but that's because I've got, as I said, this is the start of 35 days of straight broadcasting. Tomorrow I'm back at 2:00. Sunday I'm back at 2:00. And then Monday night I'm back again at 10 p.m. for another edition of big hairy news, probably with George joining alongside. Thanks, team. Sorry that the phone in didn't work tonight. It seems that who was telling me, but it skipped by. Oh, it was David. Oh, David. David is Emperor. Right. David said he couldn't get his mic working, so that's fine. We'll think about doing that. We'll think about. Oh no, it wasn't David. That was Emperor. There's Emperor right there. Here we go. I do like the idea of Friday night phone-ins, and I'm sorry my technology wasn't working. Sorry, David. I thought for some reason that you had different names on thing, whatever it's called. Maybe. Look, to be honest with you, I'd like to set up some telephone lines as well and turn this into more of an interactive thing with you guys. I love the chat, and I love putting that out there. But also, making it available for people to phone in as well. But that takes capital, that takes investment, that takes either stuff out of my back pocket, stuff from sponsors, stuff from funding from various places, because the system I'm looking at is about $5,000. Anyone want to? We could do a sponsored thing. We could do a Patreon phone-in system. All right, guys. Hey, thanks again. We'll see you here Monday night, 10 p.m. If you're in Dunedin or you're interested in Dunedin politics, back tomorrow afternoon from 2 p.m. Until then, all of my friends, thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next time. Hooroo.